American way, and we built this country called the USA, and we fly our flag cause we're proud and free, we're Americans. Red, white, and blue is our way of life. Never back down from a challenge or a fight. Nature provides, God gives the rights, we're Americans. We make up America, it's amazing America.
Hey, welcome everybody to the Sgt Frank Show, and today's guest is a very prestigious captain of the Boynton Beach Police Department, and I have a special surprise guest for him behind door number one. Door number one, tell us who you are.
My name is Daniel Griswold.
And Captain Deale, who is he to you?
He is the bird dog. He's my first trainer.
Now, is it bird dog training or police training?
Police training. When I started at the station, he was the one that tried to scare me to death.
Did it work?
No, I'm still alive, so I guess it didn't work, but I became a good cop, so that part worked.
So tell us about those first days, Captain. What was tell us about the first day on the road with the bird dog FTO.
Wait, be nice now. Be nice.
I will be nice. It was different. It was different because I'm a city slicker and he's obviously a country boy. So it was a little odd, you know. I could tell by his accent. I was like, oh boy, where are we heading with this one? But it turned out to be okay. But it was funny. He actually gave very good training. I just remember he used to do those little mini tests. You know, like we drive around and you know, the first couple of nights he would take care of all the calls, but after that he goes, hey, what was that call on the radio? And you're like, first of all, we didn't know the 10 codes or the signals, so we're trying to memorize them in our head. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the calls was, it was a signal 12 driver. He goes, hey, what was that? So the way his reaction was is like, you think it was like, oh, an armed robbery or something like that. I'm like, you're panicking. And he goes, it's just a driver driving crazy.
So you say you're a city slicker. What city are you from?
I'm originally from New York City, born in Brooklyn, grew up in Queens, then moved to Long Island after that.
So the Big Apple.
That's right.
And then you have some country bumpkin who took a bite out of the Big Apple.
Yeah, well, you know, I knew it was going to be strange when you're driving in the car, and you know, he's telling you, he says, as a cop, you have to be able to do three things at the same time, which is like, you know, nowadays we call that multitasking, but back then it was like, listen to the police radio, listen to your trainer who's talking to you, as well as listen to the regular radio, AM/FM radio station, and Griswold always had on some country station, and I'm not a country music fan, but I guess over those 8 weeks, I became a country music fan.
I guess it was either country or nothing at that point.
Yeah, so I guess when you work in midnight, you'll take country.
So you guys? That was my next question. Was what shift were you on? So obviously it was night shift.
Oh yes, we were on midnight shift, which was really not really midnight shift. It was more like 10:30 to 8:30. It was 10:30 at night to 8:30 in the morning.
Right.
So the worst part about that is that if you know, theoretically, if you think about it, if you work a midnight shift, when you get off work, you want to go home and it's still dark outside. But when you work and you see the sunrise and then you're still working as other people are going to work, it was tough.
Yeah, I bet. Now, let me go back to before you became a police officer, because I know you had a very high-paying job or a well-paying job, and you left that to come into law enforcement. Because I remember sitting at the bowling alley one night talking to you about that, and I got a little bit of your history. Tell our fans why you left that job to become a law enforcement officer here in South Florida.
Well, I was in the private sector. I was working in the banking industry, and I was actually doing quite well. You know, I started out as as basically like it's the private sector is similar to, you know, police work in terms of you know, promotional stuff. I was a clerk. Then I became a supervisor. Then I became a manager. And I worked my way up all the way till I was an actual officer of what they call an officer of the bank. So I was an assistant vice president at the bank. The reason why I left is because at the time, the banking industry became very volatile. The bigger banks swallowing up all the smaller banks, because what happens is how you determine a bank's strength is by its number of deposits, its assets. So the bigger banks are going to buy up the smaller banks to make themselves look like they have, more money on hand, which is actually true. But what happens is that they start doing a lot of downsizing when they do these corporate raids. They come in and they buy your company, and your company may have 5 or 6 offices. Well, they kind of relocated down to 1 or 2, moved the people around. So what
Right.
was happening was I kept on being moved around, and fortunately for me at the time, I was moved around to different locations, still in New York City, which is very big. So I was moved to different locations in New York City, whether it was in on Long Island, whether it was in Queens, or whether it was in Manhattan. So that's good because it's still within, like, say, an hour commute of home. But then one year they decided they want to try to do something and open up some branches here in Florida. And it was going to first it was going to be in Lake Worth. That didn't work out. Then it was going to be in Fort Lauderdale. That didn't work out. Then it was going to be in North Lauderdale. So that's where they ended up, right by the Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport on Cypress Creek Road. So I did that for like a year, and then all of a sudden this other bank comes in and says, "Oh, we want to buy up this part." I was in the mortgage part of the bank, and this other bank came in and made them an offer to buy that particular part so that they could have a bigger hold on the mortgage industry. Unfortunately, that by them purchasing that, they were going to relocate me to some like suburb outside of Louisville, Kentucky. So me being a city boy, not only that, I can say a city boy, but anybody that knows New York City, knows Long Island, knows that it's also, it's a coastal area. You're on the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
So, I grew up, even though I'm a city boy, we went to the beach all the time. Every summer we went to the beach. The beach was maybe half an hour away. So it's not like we're in, like in Detroit somewhere where you're not near any type of water or ocean. So I grew up like that. Come down to Florida, obviously, you have beach weather year round. It was beautiful. So now they're trying to get me to go to, the suburbs of Kentucky. So I went for a visit there, and it was all dirt roads. The people are driving, and next thing you know, like, they make a turn out of nowhere. You're like, how did you even see there was a road there?
Right.
You know, guy, and they're trying to sell me on this, and I'm thinking, okay, well, here I am. I'm a city boy. Grew up near the beaches of New York City, though. And then I come to Florida, and that's all Florida has is hundreds of miles of coast. And now you want to take me in and put me in a landlocked place? I said that's like putting a raccoon in a cage and keeping it there. I said that's not going to really work out. And I said, I got to be near water. They said, oh, we have plenty of lakes here. I said, what do people do for fun? They go, oh, they go out and lay out by the lake. And I'm like, oh boy, that doesn't sound too appeasing to me. And no offense to anybody from Kentucky, it's a beautiful state. I've driven through it many a times. They have all these scenic caves and stuff like that. But me being from coastal two coastal areas, Florida and New York, I couldn't see myself living there and being happy. Um, Fortunately for me, also, is while I was living and working in the Fort Lauderdale area, I became very friendly with quite a few BSO deputies who were trying to convince me to, go into law enforcement. And just so the viewers know, or the listeners out there know, my family is made up of a lot of people in law enforcement. I just didn't want to follow that path. I wanted to do something different. I have family members that were New York State troopers, NYPD police officers, federal. They were FBI and CIA, and I just wanted to do something different. And even my dad and my brother were both military, so I wanted to do something different. But you know how it is in life. There's certain callings, and I guess what happened is that God wanted me to follow that calling. So as soon as that didn't work out in terms of the private sector, I was drawn right back to what my family has done all most of our lives, and that's law enforcement. So, and that's basically how I ended up where I am now.
Well, I can tell you, I really enjoyed working with you on Midnight Shift for a while, and then as you started going up in the ranks, I had a different venue, and I was working a lot in schools, and it wasn't until I left the school sector that I came back to the road, and I'll never forget. I think I had just taken the sergeant's test, and I was number one on the list, and you kind of like took me under your wing. It was like, okay, this is what we do as a sergeant, and we went out to handle some complaint on an officer, and I really admired the way that you handled it because you were very calm, cool, and collected about it. Like, you never really got excited about a lot of things. And I think a lot of times in law enforcement, you need that calm, level headed thought process when you're dealing with crisis all around you. And then some of the other things I remember about you and your career was no matter what the situation was, you were kind of that calming voice for the other officers on the shift. When they were freaking out, you kind of gave them when you came on the radio, it was very like, okay, everybody relax. It's going to be fine. We're going to do this and we're going to move forward. And I think the things in law enforcement that you've dealt with in the last, have been very. You've gone from so many different extremes at that agency, and I want to ask you about what was the one day that you were like, man, I wish I would not have become a police officer on this day. Can you remember a day like that?
That was the day he met me.
Probably.
That was the day I checked all the presets on the radio, and every station was country.
I did that on purpose, by the way, because a lot of people would always come in and try to change the channel. I mean, they were brave.
No,
Well,
in all honesty, the Grizz, he's partially right. I would say that the day I had to reflect on and say, the realization, say, hey, do I really want to do this? Was probably in the first couple of weeks of training. And it had nothing to do with Griswold as my training, but that's when reality steps in. When you really go to these calls, you can do scenario after scenario in the academy, and they tell you what it's going to be like, and you hear stories from other officers. But until you experience it firsthand, you don't know. And I remember in the Grizz, I don't know if you'll remember this, but I'll just tell you this. The one thing that you reflect on is we went to a call. It was a domestic, and the girl was, she was bleeding, a little bit, and blood was on her lip. And we went in the house, and Grizz said, okay, I'll talk to her. You go, because we have always separate on a domestic. We separate the two parties. He says, I'll talk to her, and you talk to him. And I remember her, like, going past the bathroom. You can see there was blood in the sink. So obviously, she said he had punched her. And I remember, starting to talk to the male as to what happened, and he was denying everything. And it's so funny how the criminal element, when they're career criminals, let's just say, they know like our body language, and they know our mindset as well as we do. And me being a new officer, I didn't have that. I didn't have that mindset, and I didn't have that temperament or that body language. So I think Griswold was kind of like, after speaking with her, was trying to give me like a signal saying, hey, he's going to be under arrest. And I think the guy actually picked it up before I did, and it wasn't like maybe a wink. It was just maybe like a hand motion, and when the guy saw that, he, obviously he's been experienced and he's been arrested before. So he knew that was coming. And me being the novice, I didn't even know what the Grizz was doing. And next thing that I know, the guy took off, ran out of the apartment. He was on the second floor and just hurtled over the balcony and landed and took off running. We chased after him. We didn't catch him. He ended up getting caught a couple of days later because from jumping over the balcony on the second floor story apartment, he actually broke his ankle, but was so determined to get away. The guy ran with a broken ankle to get away. And the victim, we wrote it up as a regular, simple battery domestic. It turns out that she went to the hospital a couple of days later, and I believe she ended up having a broken jaw. So the state attorney upgraded the charges. We went to trial for the guy. And of course, you see the guy, he's like, at the time, I believe he was, he looked like, a street person. He was, disheveled and all that stuff like that. And it's always funny, like when you go to court on these cases, the guy looks like he's like, he looks like he's an executive in the bank. He has a suit on, he just got a haircut and all that type of stuff
Just
like
came
that.
from Sunday school.
Yeah, exactly. But the good part about it is, justice prevailed, and the guy ended up getting like 8 to 10 years or something like that because it wasn't his first, rodeo, and it wasn't his first time that he had beat his girlfriend. But that was like, one of the surprising things to me. I was like, wow, is this going to be like this every night? And that's when reality set in, and you have to like say to yourself, you get to that point where you say to yourself is, basically, and to put it in another term, it's basically like what your parents always tell you. You got to basically piss or get off the pot. And so you reach that point where it's like either you're going to become a cop and do the stuff, or you're going to say, hey, turn my gear in and go back to the private sector.
Right.
And that's like you have in the first 2 weeks of, the training. And once I reached that point, and I started doing the DORs with, which is basically the daily observation reports. And I could see that I was improving daily because I don't know. And it's funny because I was an FTO too. I don't know if like that's just the plan that we do, but everybody scores low. And, being that I'm a very competitive person, both athletically and academically, I always strive to get the highest grades, the highest scores. So when I started getting these scores and they were really low from Griswold, you start to think that maybe, hey, does the trainer not like me and this type of stuff like that? And then you talk to your other buddies in training and they're getting the same score. So you realize that, hey, at that inexperienced in your career, you don't really know anything. So those scores are definitely reflective of your work experience and your knowledge. And what you want to see is a gradual improvement as you get to the end of the phase, which I obviously did. And I enjoy police work. And I honestly, the only regret I have in my life is not doing law enforcement sooner.
Yeah, it's kind of hard being a trainer as well, because you know everything, and most people that come in are very naive because they haven't dealt with it before. So
Yep.
you have to have patience, and sometimes it's hard to have that patience. But can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So, I mean, I can even remember when I was new. I mean, I can tell you a story that I was so naive that I got a call when I was first released. Now, I have already been through training. I was released. I was working the mall because that's where all the new rookies went, was to work that Zone 8, if you remember that,
Mm-hmm.
and the little golf cart thing that we rode around in, we called the Spiv. So I get a call of a burglary to a vehicle, and I go over it. Now, I'm used to everybody running when when the police come around. So I get there, and the guy's there, and security's there, and the owner of the car's there. And the owner says, I came out. This guy was inside my car under the dash trying to hotwire my car. And he's just standing there. He's like, yes, I was. And I was like, okay. He goes, what? I'm like, well, what happened? He goes, well, I came here with friends. I'm from Miami. We came in the exact same car like this. I lost them in the mall. So I came out to wait by the car, and I didn't have the keys to get in. So I jimmied the door, and I got in, and it was hot. And this is in the middle of summer, and Florida's real hot. So he says, so I was trying to hotwire it to get the AC to start running. Now, I believe this guy, like, totally. And I mean, I was like, oh man, what do I do? I mean, is this just an accident, or is this guy really still in the car? So I'm you're told not to call your sergeants if you don't have to. So I'm trying to call my zone partners that are close to me, and everybody's busy. And remember Sergeant Callahan? He gets on the radio. What's going on? I'm like, can you 56 me over here? Which meant, can you meet me over here? So he comes over. I tell him the story. He looks at me like I'm the biggest idiot. And he goes, arrest him. And I was like, and it turns out the guy tells me later, yeah, I lied to you. And so it's like, when you're brand new, you just don't realize, that everybody lies to you, first of all. And you're not used to these kind of stories and things that go on. So what do you, now that I got off of me, sorry, or off of you and on to me, but what do you think was your best day at work?
I think my best day, well, there's two best days I had, or at least when I say, I mean, it's hard to say what a best day is.
You're right.
Um,
Right.
I guess as a law enforcement officer, what we strive for is justice to the public and justice to the victims. We like to see them, receive justice. So when we see the bad guy getting sentenced, and it's not necessarily like we don't like, just like, and from your experience too, and I think you might have told me this, or Frank might have told me this. People always say, how do you get to see all those car accidents with all that gore and all that stuff like that? And the way you are able to cope with that is, you always used to tell me, don't put a name to the face. You know what I'm saying? So as long as we don't know who it is, it doesn't affect us.
Right.
It's just another body. And it's kind of like the same thing. So like these bad guys, when they go away for a long time and we put them away for a long time, I don't take it personal. I don't look at it. And even when they don't get a long sentence, I don't take it personal, because that's what affects a lot of people, a lot of cops, and they get stressed out. They get depressed. When you do a whole big caper or a nice, really good case, and then the state attorney says, oh, you're missing this or you're missing that, and then the guy walks on a technicality. Some people take that personally. Me, I don't. I like, okay, and you said it at one point. Hey, if we don't get that speeder today, he's not going to stop speeding. He'll be speeding tomorrow. We'll get him tomorrow. So that's how I look at my law enforcement. But I like my best days are when I know that victim of a crime got justice. And in two cases that I recall, one was where I got the guy's name. It's not even really important, like I said, because it's not really important who he is. But there was one case I was on, and the detectives actually said, "Man, you made our job so much easier. You did all the legwork for us." It was a case where this lady had said some man broke into her house and kind of like raped her, and then she said that he ran off, and she said something about, oh, he went over by Clyde's or something like that. So I went over there and we saw some guys there, and there was a guy that partially matched the description, and I was able to, go out with him with the detectives, and they brought her over, and she said, "Yeah, this is the guy," and he was denying it. And you're talking, this was like 20 years ago, where DNA wasn't that strong or wasn't that relevant. But it was like one of the first like DNA cases, and they were able to get some DNA out of the house, and like, sure enough, the guy had been in the house, and he got like 25 years to life because this wasn't his first time he had broken into someone's apartment or house and tried to sexually assault a female victim. So I felt good that we got this guy off the street for a while. And then the second one that I felt good about was the one where it was I believe it's the Roadrunner. It was called the Roadrunner. It was a convenience store, like 1500 block North Federal Highway, and they had these four guys that went in there, and they robbed the place of like $1,500, and they took off. And one of the other officers, Wilmer Rodriguez, spotted the vehicle. We pursued the vehicle. They ended up crashing. The one guy was stuck in the car because of the crash, and the other guys fled on foot. Make a long story short, is out of the four guys, we got all four of them. The state attorney offered them, plea deals. And the funny thing about it was the two guys that took the plea was the one guy that went in with the gun, and the other guy that was standing outside the door as lookouts. The two guys that were in the car, that remained in the car, said, "Oh, we didn't do anything. So we're going to let it go to trial." And the state attorney tried to tell them, "Hey, if you take it to trial, the way we're charging you guys all as equal." And the state attorney offered everybody involved 8 years, and they decided not to do it. They took it to trial, and I was glad to see that the judge said, "Hey, they offered you a fair and reasonable plea. You decided not to do it. You were found guilty. Bam, gave the two guys who really didn't even go in the store, were in the car, gave them both 55 years each." And the reason why is obviously they scored high in terms of being career criminals. But the thing about that was dumb about them is we ended up getting video of all four of them going into Walmart and purchasing the BB guns. So in the vehicle that we recovered was the receipts for the BB guns that they had just purchased to commit this crime. So there was 4 BB guns, but only 2 of them actually went in the store. But the other guys did arm themselves, so they weren't really as innocent as they were trying to say they were. Like, hey, this guy's he just went to the store to pick up a soda, and we didn't know he was going to rob the place. Yeah, but why are there 4 BB guns in the back there? So when the public or the victim receives justice, it puts a smile on your face. It makes you feel that much better as a law enforcement officer. So those are a couple of my 2 better days. Other than that, I try to make in order to cope with being a law enforcement officer and the stuff that we see, you try to pick something out every day. So every day I try to pick a moment that's a good thing. You know what I'm saying? So when we go to a car accident and we help the person get out of the car and avoid more serious injuries, we call that a good day. And that's how I do it.
I think it's really great that you bring up the point that the state attorney, the judge, the court system, because if somebody doesn't go to jail, how many times does the public say, "Oh, the police must have messed up"? And a lot of times that's not the situation. The situation is because of our system, like you were saying before with points and everything else, determines how much time these career criminals or any criminal goes to jail. And I think a lot of times people overlook that, and they just want to blame the police for this, that, and the other. And the reality of it is, it's because of the system.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and it's not just the point system in terms of the sentence that the convicted person gets. You got to also look at it this way: our state attorneys are elected officials, as well as the judges are elected. Well, when they want re-election, when they campaign for re-election, most of the time, obviously, their campaign platform is going to be on their conviction rate. Well, they determine their conviction rate because of the fact of the type of cases that they take. There's cases, and from working in law enforcement as many years as you did, the Grizz as many years as he's done, that there's some cases that the state attorney, if it's like a case where they're not going to get a 98% or better conviction chance, they don't want to take it. They'll offer a plea, or they'll just no process it because they'll say, "Oh, there's not a chance that we're going to get it." They don't even try. They just, what I'm saying? Because they want to say, "Hey, I have a 98% conviction rate." And that's what it is. And just really quickly, I just tell you this. The funny thing is I was working with Gary Lee, another former detective from Boynton Beach Police Department. We were looking, he was asking me, because he knew I knew the guys in Zone 3. We were looking for this guy, a Spanish guy. He was wanted for Gary Lee had PC for him on for 3 home invasion robberies. And Gary Lee had already gotten with the state attorney, and the state attorney said, "Hey, if this guy turns himself in, tell him we will offer him, 10 years on each one to be run um, concurrently, which means that they're going to run all at the same time. So he's going to serve 10 years for all 3 sentences together, as opposed to consecutively, which means he'll do 10 years, finish that one, do another 10 years, which will end up being 30 years.
Right.
So Gary Lee says, "Hey, do you know this guy?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah." He goes, "Who? Who?" I said, "Oh," because he only knew his street name. And the guy turns out, I said, "Oh, yeah, that's the guy. He lives off of Seacrest Court." So we go up there, we knock on the door, and the father answers the door, and we say, "Hey, is your son home?" He goes, "No, no, he's not here." And Gary Lee thought that the guy was trying to just pull a fast one, to protect his son. And Gary goes, "Look, look, look, we're not trying to do anything bad to your son. We just have something that the state attorney wants to offer him because we know that he's done this, and we like him to turn himself in and get it over with, because if he's on the run, he's going to end up, doing something, hurting somebody else, and blah blah blah." So, make a long story short, the father says, "No, no, no. I understand my son. Hey, he's done some bad things, and he needs to serve his time for doing those bad things. But unfortunately, he's not here. He's actually serving time right now." And Gary Lee goes, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." So Gary Lee goes, "Well, what's his full name?" So of course we had I knew his first and last name, but it's spelled a little differently. And so the father gave us his complete full name and date of birth. Gary Lee checks the Department of Corrections database, and sure enough, this guy had done the same exact thing, 3 home invasion robberies, but in Polk County. Okay,
Wow.
so he got caught, went to trial, got convicted, and he's doing 25 to life on those charges. And our state attorney was going to offer 10 years on each one to run concurrently. So that's what I'm saying. When you talk about that, it just goes to show you that not only the system, but where in the state you live, how the system affects you.
Well, I
You know
can
what I'm
tell
saying?
you, if you get arrested in Polk County with Grady Judd, you're going to jail
Yeah.
forever.
And that state attorney, whoever he is, he's less, obviously, and I don't want to get involved in politics that way, but I'm saying he's obviously less, let's say hypothetically, less liberal, but they are much stricter on their sentencing guidelines than they are here, because the guy had the same exact crimes. And our
Right.
state attorney is going to offer him 10 years, and he got 25 to life, for the same exact thing.
Right. Oh, that's
So,
great. That's great that you were a part of that. And you know what? I think a lot of times people overlook that as well, what our officers do above and beyond. Because you're not, that's not part of the, I guess you could say, our training in the academy and stuff like that, but it's your tenacity, just like the bird dog, his tenacity when he was a police officer on the street, as well as the traffic and D Bureau, everything else, is what put so many of those bad guys away, because he just would not stop. And I used to love watching his interview process, because he would walk in there, their best friend, and they would be like, "Yeah, oh, we're friends. Yeah, I did this, and not realizing, yeah, this is a police officer in front of you that you're telling this to, which is great, because, his training taught him all that. And those are the kind of people skills that we need for our younger officers coming up in the ranks, because we're not getting that today, especially in schools. When I go into a school, or in the younger ages in the elementary schools, a lot of these kids are missing the structure that we need, because unfortunately the last 20 years law enforcement has pulled out of our school system, and now with Adopt a Cop USA we're reintroducing that, and it's a lot harder. If we would have been able to continue what we did before, it would make our jobs a lot easier, but unfortunately we have to start all the way back at zero. And I know from my experience, I was the last full-time officer that we had in our schools, and that was 20 years ago. And since that time, we had a shooting at the mall on Christmas Eve, where a gang member killed another gang member. We had another kid up in the North End where they came looking for him, and he wasn't home, and the bad element killed his mother and his aunt with an AK-47, because of the actions of the child. And I used to stand there talking on that front porch with that mother for hours, and she just couldn't understand why we didn't do more in the schools. And then she ended up paying the ultimate price for her son's lack of, structure, and lack of following the letter of the law, and being a good citizen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Frank. Because the thing that, like I said, if you want to talk about now, because with me, I have 22 years, and if Grizz can believe that, I actually have 22 years in now.
Wow, you're
So,
old, bird dog.
It's scary. Yeah, just
oh, I actually have 20, me, and I actually have 22 years in. So he was there for day one, 22 years ago. But anyway,
Wow.
the big thing about it is like you said, yes, the taking the law enforcement out of schools, and now they're just starting to reinstitute that. But the thing about it too is that the thing that saddens me, and you guys may have experienced this. I'm just starting to experience this. As I start to read some of the officers' reports, I see the names, and the names of the people that they're arresting are like the junior to the person that we were arresting.
Right, right,
It's like wow, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, obviously somebody, he obviously had a negative role model, which was,
right,
his father.
right.
And it's like, like if I look at it now, the guy's like say 25. That means that he was, when I started, he was 3. So he was impressionable. He was probably one of those kids that when we were walking around the mall that came up and gave us 5 and we gave a badge to. And now this is a kid because of negative role model that his parent provided for him is now doing the same thing that his dad did, and his dad was probably doing the same thing that his dad did. So it's just like a continuous cycle.
And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to cause that disruption and that destructive cycle. And our whole goal is to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community, and also with our businesses. And we're bringing that to the forefront with the different things that we're doing. And that's why this program is so important for us to share with the community, because they don't know who Captain Deale was when he was a rookie officer, or Officer Danish on his first day, and even Officer Griswold on his first day. I mean, this is a legacy of leadership that wants to do something good with our country and our kids in the community. And I really appreciate all that you've done to help support our nonprofit in Boynton Beach, especially because that's kind of where it all started. I was in the Coast Guard before that, but I wanted to. The reason I became a local police officer was because I wanted to get in the schools. I wanted to do something to make a difference for our kids. And with the Police Explorer program, that was another really great way that I could interact with the community and our children to help them as a guidepost, to make the right choices. And I know that your daughter, Brianna, was a police explorer, and we're going to do another show where she's actually going to be on the show with us, talking about how her dad and the police explorers and different things helped her become the great citizen that she is on her quest, in our country today, and helping us put the United back in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll let her tell her own story, but I can just say from, my experience with her, not that she was ever a bad child, and don't get me wrong on that, but I think the Explorer program, steered her definitely in the right direction. And from her experiences doing it, she's able to, you know, and like I said, I'll let her tell her story, but I'm just talking about my youngest 2 daughters. She's told them what a positive experience it was for them, and they can't wait till they're old enough to do it. They're already asking me when they can sign up. They had me go and check with the current Explorers program to find out what the minimum age is to do it. So that's how much of an influence it's had on them because of the fact that their sister went through the program.
Well, that is fantastic. And I was just going to ask you that. And we're actually exploring, funny I should say that, we're actually exploring a junior deputy type program with our Law Dog program. I don't know if you've seen some of our videos with Sgt Frank's Bird Dog posse, but the Law Dog is one of those characters, and he's going to be coming down to your city to talk to you guys in your schools. And wait a minute, I think he's actually coming into the studio. Hold on one second. Hey, Sergeant Frank, it's the Law Dog. Hey, Law Dog, what are you doing? Well, I was just walking by, and I thought I would stick my head in and talk about the amazing things that Adopt a Cop USA is doing. And I heard about the Paul Deale from your stories, and I just wanted to say howdy.
How you doing there, Law Dog?
Well, Mr. Paul Deale, I knew all about you from Sergeant Frank. We have long road trips, and it gets very, very tiring on the road. So sometimes we share stories, and he's very impressed and is very honored that you were able to come on his Sgt Frank Show today, and we at the Law Dog Posse, or I'm sorry, at the Sgt Frank's Bird Dog Posse, really appreciate everything you and all the other fine officers do in Boynton Beach Police Department.
Hey, it's always a pleasure, and I'm just so glad that that Frank and Bird Dog can appreciate me, to see, based on their leadership and training that they provided for me, where it got me to the point where I not only achieved what they achieved, but surpassed them in terms of rank. You know what I'm saying? So that's what you always want to give back a little bit to the people you train. So I'm hoping that, like, even when I was an FTO, that some of the people I trained will surpass me and maybe be a chief somewhere else or something like that. But it's always good to see that the people are taking that direction and moving forward with it. And I'm sure that Frank and Bird Dog are proud of the person and the officer that I've become, because they started with me from day one. Had they given me some type of, let's say, negative opinion or something of law enforcement, it might have turned out differently. But the way they addressed law enforcement back in those days, I knew at that point this is something I wanted to do and was going to do and do to my fullest.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point, and that's something that myself and the Bird Dog are really strong about, because that legacy of leadership is something that we really need to work in law enforcement. I know you've seen it over the years that hiring those qualities in a person has become increasingly difficult for the leadership in law enforcement agencies. And I know, the fact that you were a training officer, and then as you moved up the ranks and you were supervising different officers, that you've seen a change, a shift in our country. And most of that comes from the fact, and I think you said this earlier, when they removed patriotism and prayer out of our schools, you could see the decline of our society on an individual basis for our students.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I
Me
agree.
too.
I mean, we've become this political, let's say, this political correctness is just overwhelming us. Whereas, I mean, I just saw something the other day, and I said, you know what, this is getting so out of hand. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but they've been putting posts on, let's say, Facebook and other social media, where they're calling the Peanuts characters. They're saying that that cartoon is racist, and I don't even get it, because I was reading articles when I was in college about Schultz and how he created the characters and even included one of the kids there, so that way there wouldn't be just all white kids. And now they're saying somehow he's the kid that he created is the token, and it's a racist cartoon. And it's like, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think that people like you and other leaders have to call that for what it is, and it's really just grandstanding, and we've become over offendable about things. I can't imagine that today, if the Bird Dog was an FTO and one of these kids jumped in the patrol car and was like, okay, I'm going to show you how to do this. I just got out of the academy, how that would have went for that particular person, because of all the insane overcorrectness, like you just said. And it's something that we need to just stop and say, okay, this is one country, and we are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think I heard that someplace before.
Yeah, it used to be in our schools.
Yeah, we've heard that a lot, but now they I mean, if you remember when and I don't know if it's either before or somewhere during the beginning of my career, but when you used to go to testify, remember you used to say, "So help you God." They don't say that anymore either, even when you testify.
You're right. Well,
they're trying to take God out of the equation, which is what happens is, like with law enforcement and everything else, you have to teach cultural awareness and basically like respect to everything. So most religions today, okay, are monotheistic, meaning that they believe in one God. So whether you're Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, okay, all those religions are one God. It's the same God. Whether you call him God, Yahweh, or Allah, it's the same person. It's just a different name, but we're all saying it to the same person. So the fact that we're trying to take God out of the equation to appease all the different religions makes absolutely no sense.
I agree with you. I agree with
That's
you.
a great point.
Yes, and we are definitely going to have you on our show again because you are extremely versed and knowledgeable with law enforcement, and I think it's going to be a great idea to do a show with Brianna because I'm sure there was a lot of fun anecdotes that happened when she was in the Explorer program that we can share, and I'm so happy to see the young lady that she has become, and I just think it's a great testament to her parents doing the right thing and providing the right guidance as she grew up over the years. So I'm really excited about that.
Absolutely. Like I said, so I'll let her touch on that. But the thing that most impressed me is I think that the Explore program, and just like the programs that you're starting with the youth, I think that instills some type of drive into the kids. It gives them motivation. It shows them that they gives them some self-worth, and it allows them to say, hey, I can do this. And it's like goal setting, basically. Like
Absolutely.
with all those the kids program, the Explorers, and the programs you do. Whether it's like, hey, we're going to do physical fitness. Okay, today we only did 10 push-ups, but our goal is by the end of the month that you guys will be doing 15 or 20. Just the goal setting part of it shows them that that inspires them that in life that's what they should do for themselves, set goals for themselves as opposed to just going through the motions in school, getting out of school and then going, oh well, I'll just wait for the job to come knocking on my door instead of going and getting.
Right, and we're going to talk about fifth place trophies next time. So one last thing we'd like to ask you is what's the one bit of advice our citizens can do to help our law enforcement officers out there today that are trying to help them on a daily basis? What's the one thing that you would like to tell our listening public from your law enforcement side of the table?
I would just say always support the blue. That's all I can say. I can't put any more simpler than that. Support the blue. We're out there to serve you. We're not out there for our own, our own course of action. We're out there to serve you. Take that opportunity, use it. You may not like, everybody may not like when they come in contact with the police, they may not like the end result. You know what I'm saying? But the point of fact is that we are there to support you, so we need your support as well. To serve you, so we need your support. Always support the blue.
Well, very good, very good. Thank you very much, Captain Deale, from taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're probably on your way to work, and the bird dog wants to say his final message.
I love Paul Deale. No, I'm very proud of you. I've been proud of you for moving up in the ranks. I never did any of that. I wasn't as smart as you, so but you've done good, and I'm proud that I was part of your initial training.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your help too, Frank. So over the years, because we've been on a lot of calls together over the years. More than it's funny because after I got on my own and Grizz was still training, Grizz went into some other specialty units and stuff like that. I believe like either the man unit or some type of vice unit. So, but Frank, I worked with you quite a bit on the road, and even like you said, when I was moving up the ranks, when you came back from the school and came back to the road, I was right there. So we always had that connection. And I don't even know if you remember this. I still have a picture of it. It's kind of funny because it pops up on my phone as a reminder every year. You showed up at I had a breakfast. It was a breakfast with the dads at my kids' elementary school,
right,
in Beach, and you showed up for it. And I have a picture of you and me sitting down at this little tiny kids' lunch table eating breakfast at my kids' elementary school in uniform.
Well, me, I never missed a free meal, that's for sure. But you gotta send me that picture so we can put it on our page.
And I'll always respect you for that too, because it had nothing to do with the city of Boynton Beach because the school was in Delray. It had nothing to do with your kids because your kids were already, obviously grown. But you came to support me in my role as a father and police officer role model for those other kids at that school. And I appreciate that.
Oh, man. Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me.
I can't wait to see that picture because for those of you who don't know,
a bad picture.
Mr. Deale is
just
like,
eating. It's just us eating breakfast with these little milk cartons like they have in school.
I want to see the big boys sitting in the little bitty tables.
All right, I'm gonna find it. I'll text it to you today.
Awesome. We're gonna put it on the radio show so people can see it.
All right.
Well, again, thank you very much, Captain Deale. We really appreciate it and everything you do. And again, all the officers at Boynton Beach, I know they learned a lot from you and appreciate your great leadership skills. And be safe today, brother, and we will talk to you very soon.
All right, thank you, guys.
There is nothing good about going selling drugs. The money don't mean nothing when you're harming everyone. And you can get killed bringing pain to your mom. Take a legal substance and you can OT. Overdose from nasty chemicals in the streets. Live a happy life, you gotta keep your hands clean. And most importantly, think about your family.